Hi everybody, welcome to Tidalwave Studio. My name is Patrick Damiani and today I've got something really special for you. Around 12 years ago, I recorded this album called Asa with the artist named Falkenbach, which is a real pioneer in the pagan metal genre. There is one song in particular called Eweroun that I would like to talk about today. It has been very well received. It has been streamed millions of times. So I thought you guys may enjoy some insights of this song. So let's listen to it a bit and have a look at some details of that song.
Vintar stilta vis I forjans gilden lys I narjars blodin rot narjars blodin rot
Okay, as you can hear, this is a really epic, big sounding song. Although the intro is more intimate and originally this intro was not part of the song. The song actually started with the drums and we recorded high vocals that you can hear in the mix and there is an octave below. And I really love that low octave in combination with the acoustic guitar. So what I did is I just copy-pasted like 8 bars of the acoustic guitar and put the low vocal below and just played it to Vratyas, the head of Falkenbach. And he actually really liked it, although usually he liked the voice more in the background. He did never really want his voice to be up front and really clearly audible. He liked it, this mystical touch of the voice being buried in reverb somewhere far in the back. But in this case, somehow he really liked it, fortunately, because I really love that intro the way it is. So now this song has like an acoustic intro going into this metal part. The main part of this introduction is, of course, the vocal, which is the low octave of the melody he's singing. And then we have some acoustic guitars. We double tracked those guitars, the strumming guitars. Let me play them quickly for you. And they are the same guitars that play with the electric guitars later when the band kicks in. We double-tracked those guitars. We used 2 different guitars just to get a little bit of spread and more richness in the sound than by just using one guitar. We used, on one side it was a Taylor and on the other side it was a Tanglewood, as a British maker of guitars. They complement each other pretty well, so we get a nice, rich acoustic guitar sound. Treatment-wise, there was not a lot going on. If I bypass all the plugins for a second. This is the raw sound as it came out of the microphone. We used the Perlman TM1 tube microphone to record the guitars. It just captures the guitar really nicely. So the only treatment that we did was, yeah, the usual stuff, cut off a little bit of low end. I used a little bit of saturation just to compress or compact the sound a little bit without actually using compression. Here there is a little high shelf EQ and then just some leveling. The limiter is not really limiting, but it's just leveling the guitar a little bit. So basically, this is one thing that is going to be seen across the whole session, is that we tried to capture the essence of the sound really at the source. It was not a thing of, yeah, let's have a look at it later in the mix, but we tried to purposely take decisions sound-wise and atmosphere-wise and texture-wise of the sounds that they would really fit the atmosphere that we, or let's say the artist, really wanted for the particular sounds. What else do we have here? One thing is interesting, that there is this low drum playing in the intro. This is actually one sample of a taiko drum that I recorded in my old studio back like 20 years ago. What did we use that for? I think we recorded a CD with South American native music players, and funny enough, we used the taiko drum to play the powwow, which is basically a big drum that a couple people play simultaneously around. And since we didn't have like an original South American drum like this, I asked a friend of mine who plays the Japanese taiko drum. And yeah, so we recorded taiko drum, and I extracted a couple of hits just in case I would need them. And this is one case where I just used that sample. What else do we have? We have this little Schellen, I called it. It's basically like jingle bells. It is a little stick with some bells on it, and you can rattle them, and this fitted the atmosphere nicely. Listen to this. I think I still have that. Give me a second. Yeah, here it is. That's the one we used on that album. Yeah, the only thing left worth mentioning in the intro is this little Wagner bass drum build-up that goes into the part where the band kicks in. This was from East-West Symphonic Orchestra library, just like a big Wagner drum that's being rolled in a crescendo. Yeah, and then the band kicks in. Let's have a look at what we have here. Okay, one thing worth mentioning is the drums are recorded in a very, very Spartanic and simple way. There is really not a lot of tracks. We have a bass drum track, a snare room track, overheads, and the toms. That's it. There is not like, there's even only one snare microphone that actually has been used in this session. I think I probably recorded snare top and bottom and hi-hat microphone and ride microphone and tons of stuff. But at the end of the day, this is all that has been used. Bass drum, snare, overheads, and the floor microphones. I am not going to go so much into the detail of mixing the drums. I have other videos that go into those details in great depth. There is nothing spectacular going on here. As I can see also, there's really not a lot of plugins on those channels. I try to capture them as close as possible to what I wanted to hear in the mix later without having to fiddle around too much in the mix. Let me solo the drums for a second so that you can hear them isolated from the rest of the band. One thing worth mentioning is reverb. This kind of music with this epicness always likes some reverb, some space and some size. So there is a big reverb on the snare drum, but except from this, I almost never use any reverb on overheads. It's usually the snare drum that really wants this large size, but I try to keep other elements as dry as possible, because if you put reverb on everything, then everything is just far back in the hall somewhere and nothing is grippy anymore. So bass drum is dry, overheads are dry, It's basically just the snare drum that has this big reverb. There is one really nice part where the floor toms kick in. Let me show you this in context, and then I solo the drums and show you what I did here. There we have these two massive big floor tom hits, and let me solo the whole section for a second, and then I show you what we did here. Okay, those toms sound huge and massive. Well, what we did is we, of course, recorded the original toms from the kit, but we also added some samples because it's just really, really difficult to get that size out of a normal sized recording room if you don't use some tricks. So what does that part sound like without the samples? It's actually really nice, but it's a different thing to add like samples that have been recorded in a large room instead of pouring tons of reverb on a sound that is very dry and very close to you. It just sounds different. So this is the sound of the samples that we used. Yeah, those samples is a mix of 3 different sounds that are just stacked one on top of the other just to get the size. Can't remember which library or where I took them from, if I recorded some myself or if it's all from libraries, but yeah, they just do what they were supposed to do. One other detail about the drums is we always had a lot of discussions about the hi-hat. Vratyas, the head of Falkenbach, he likes his cymbals to sound, as he says, bronzen. Like really not too sharp, not too bright, but like, yeah, bronzen is actually a pretty good word for it. So it's shimmery, but in a dark way. So we try to figure out what that really means. So in the end, it is like a hi-hat that is not too bright, and then not too open, not that is really like splashing around, not too close, because he didn't like attacks on the hi-hat. It has to be like a shh kind of sound. So we fiddled around a little bit until we got what we needed. And we actually didn't use a direct microphone on the hi-hat for the mix. It's just what has happened in the room on the overheads. Just listen to the drums again and listen to the hi-hat, how smooth it sounds. Yeah, so nothing aggressive about it, nothing really in your face. It's like a hi-hat pad that is just, yeah, giving some atmosphere and some groove to the whole part. Treatment-wise on the drums, I use parallel compression on the whole drums, as I almost always do. I hardly ever use compression on individual tracks. I just like to keep them as natural as possible. But I also like the sound of compression, so I do what many engineers do is I leave one part of the drums dry, and then in parallel I add a heavily compressed signal. So let me show you what the drums sound with this parallel compression and without, pretty much uncompressed. Yeah, as you can hear, as soon as the parallel compression kicks in, all the reverbs get longer, get more density, everything just sounds bigger and fuller. And if I stop the parallel compression, then it's kind of boring. It's just like a small little drum kit. So compression is an essential part of really mixing great drums, and parallel compression for me is really like my special drum sauce that I really love on drums. Okay, let's have a look at the bass that we used on this song. Yeah, so there is not a lot of treatment on this bass here in this session. There's just a tiny little bit of corrective EQ and a limiter just slamming the bass. We recorded the bass with my trusty old Ibanez SG bass, nothing fancy, just the bass I happen to use for pretty much everything I ever played on any album. And we used distortion from Electro-Harmonix. It was actually the bass Big Muff, this green pedal. We really loved it, this fuzzy character that it has. And yeah, we just printed it on the way in, committed to the sound as we did for pretty much everything in this session. Just choose something and went with it. No safety net, no DI track or whatsoever. We just went with what we had in mind for that part, and let's go. Yeah, the same applies to the guitars. We tried to find a sound that would not need a lot of treatment or tweaking in the mix so that the character was right from the start. What we used was my trusty old Ibanez Destroyer guitar. It has been modified over the years. I changed pickups several times. Now there's Seymour Duncan pickups in. I don't know if they were already in for that session. But yeah, it's nothing spectacular. This is the first real guitar that I ever bought, and I have recorded everything I ever did with this guitar, from all the Falkenbach albums to all the Carrara Angren albums where I had the pleasure to play the guitars, and so many other projects. So this is the guitar. And I still remember what we used as amp and on the way in. Funny enough, we used the bass Big Muff on the guitar as well to get like a fuzzy, thick, granular guitar sound. And we went into my old Soldano amp head, which is a tube amp, and it has also this more grainy, not so high gainy sound. So we wanted to get like a really fuzzy, mid-rangey, grippy sound. And let's solo the electric guitars for a second and see what they sound like isolated. Yeah, they sound pretty nasty. They are not very, very pretty, but as always, they are just one part of the puzzle. So the main stringed instruments here are the bass guitar, who is filling up the low end and going way into the mid-range. And then right in the mid-range, we have these gnarly guitars. And then there will be also the acoustic guitars who give us the top end sheen and also some nice low end. So these guitars do exactly what they were supposed to do. We double tracked the guitars. I think I used the bridge pickup on one side and the neck pickup on the other side. And then also what we did is we split up the big chords into a lower portion and a higher portion. Let me solo this so that you know what I'm talking about. This is the lower portion of the chord, and then so instead of just like quad tracking the whole big chord, what we did is like double tracking the low part and then double tracking the upper portion of the chord, so that you just get more sound and yeah, a richer sound instead of just recording the whole chord with one. Because sometimes, like with distorted guitars, if you have distortion going on and play more than 2 or 3 chords at once, then all this fizzy from the distortion is going to be just overwhelming. But that's not what we wanted. We wanted like a solid mid-range and not so much fuzz. That's why splitting it up really helps for this. Treatment-wise, there is just a little bit of, let's say, character enhancement going on. No corrective big moves have been done. Let me solo the lower guitar for a second and bypass all the plugins. This is the basic sound that came out of the amp. We also recorded the guitars with the Perlman TM1 tube microphone, which in itself, it cannot handle high sound pressure levels so well, but I kind of used it to our advantage because the microphone was also like starting to distort a little bit on itself and then going into a preamp that was driven hot and then with a big muff pedal in front. So all to get like a lot of different kinds of distortion into that sound to get really a rich harmonic overtone structure. But at the bass, that's the sound. And if I re-engage the plugins, it doesn't do a lot, just like calming down the sound a little bit and adding a little bit of, sparkle to the sound. But that's just about it. Nothing else has really been done to that guitar sound. But as I mentioned before, it's like the electric guitars are only one part of the combined sound. What's still left to be heard is the acoustic guitars, which are basically the same guitars as we heard in the introduction, only with a shorter room on them. Because in the introduction, there could be like a more dreamy reverb on the guitars. There is not a lot going on in the introduction, so there is space for a dreamy reverb. But as soon as the band kicks in, I wanted to keep the acoustic guitars tighter and more focused and not so lush with a big reverb. That's why I put them on a separate track, and this is what they sound like. As I said, the same guitars as in the beginning. Originally, the intro didn't exist, so it's just a copy-paste of the actual guitars in the song. So now if we listen to the electric guitars again, and then I add in the bass and I add in the guitars, you see how the structure of those guitars just build up, extending to the low, extending to the highs, and giving the full picture. Of reverb and delay on the vocals. We come to that in a second. So as you can hear, really like this intersecting sound thing that every part of a song, every instrument or instrument group is really one part of the sound. Nothing is masking the other stuff, but everything is working together to form one big thing. Before we come to the vocals, let's have a look at one or two other instruments that we still have to discover here. Here there is like a little instrumental part where we recorded some violins. Listen to that. The pizzicato have been played by Nikos Mavridis, who is an old friend of mine. We have recorded, I don't know, countless violin sessions together. And back then I asked him if he wanted to play the pizzicato for this part, which he did. So this is the part he played. As you can hear, there is a lot of compression and distortion and saturation on these pizzicatos. Just otherwise, they would not be able to poke through this intense band mix. So although they sound really like hissy and a little bit distorted, soloed, they work just fine in context. So this is basically a thing that, you cannot stress enough, that it doesn't really matter how stuff sounds individually, it has to sound nice in context. Nobody is ever going to listen to that sound solo. So don't care if it's hissy or distorted as long as it works in the mix. But what we had to add was some high pizzicato. Honestly, I'm not sure if this was an afterthought, and it sounds to me as if this was out of a library, probably East-West Symphonic Orchestra again. So maybe we started with the low pizzicato, and then in the mix I thought, yeah, I want a little bit more brilliance up there, and I just added samples of a higher octave of pizzicato. Next we have another little instrumental part. Let's listen to this. Here the melody has been played by, I think it's 2 acoustic guitars that have been doubled. No, it's actually 3. There is one in the center that is playing darker, and then there are 2 doubles on the sides. I mentioned before that we committed a lot to certain sounds in this session. And this seems to have been committed to one stereo track as well. Just, I don't like to have like 10 million tracks that are staying there in the mix session. If I feel that something is just the way I like it, I combine it into one mono or one stereo track, and yeah, throw out the individual tracks. I keep them backup somewhere, but I like to have like, yeah, just one track instead of 5 if it's possible. So this is what we did here. And then to add a little bit of high-end sparkle, we added this here, a harpsichord sample. I don't know if you could notice that the harpsichord sample has a huge reverb on it, because it just took reverb very well, but the guitars are pretty much dry. There is a little delay going on, but compared to the harpsichord, it appears almost dry. So, as I also mentioned a little bit earlier, is I don't like to put a ton of reverb on everything, because if you put reverb and effects on everything, then yeah, you don't have any contrast. It's really always nice to have something more in front, something more in the back, and also use like the whole width that you have in your mix to just place stuff everywhere. It just makes for a richer sound, and this is what we try to do here. Like one sound very high with a lot of reverb, the other one lower with less reverb. So yeah, we fill up the whole box that we have available to put our stuff in. The acoustic guitars also play slightly differently in this part. The rest of the song is like a straight strumming pattern on the acoustic guitars, but here this is what the guitars do. We really love this largely played doom doom bling, really like spread out chord, because it just gives a nice texture and a nice vibe to this part. The only thing left instrument wise is the acoustic guitars of the outro. Let me show you this outro part quickly. This is the thing I always enjoy doing with, yeah, especially acoustic guitars. It's like there is one main guitar that is playing something pretty straight, like this one. It's a very straight pattern, it's always the same. And then I listen to it and try to find some pockets in this pattern and see, okay, we could add another guitar, but not with exact the same pattern. That is just boring. So let's try to find another phrasing that just matches well with what we already have, and just try to build something big out of small individual elements. So like a little picked guitar that is just doing maybe even some random phrasings, just to add a little bit of life and some ear candy. Oh, here's playing this, here's playing there. So it's not repetitive like 16 bars of exactly the same thing. That's why we started with this. And then added in something like this. So you can hear sometimes the note is skipped and it's not always exactly the same. And what I also always do, and I can really recommend doing this, is when you are adding like this ear candy, let's say a guitar somewhere, don't put that guitar overly loud on your headphones while you're playing it. I try to put it maybe even lower than what it is going to be in the mix bar, ideally pretty much where it's going to be, so that you can play really dynamically and feel the way that instrument is going to sit in the mix later. If you have it really loud, then yeah, maybe you would play completely differently. You would play too softly, or if you put the guitar far too low, you would play too loud, and it would just not sit naturally in the mix the way it does now. So just like feel for the music and try to feel for, yeah, now I can go a little bit up, I can go a little bit down. The same goes for the other guitar. Yeah, to me personally, that makes the whole difference. The main guitar, it's nice, but it's always the same. So adding these two guitars that have some variation all the time and some ear candy here and there, this is really, really something I really appreciate to do. We also use this little jingle bell thing in the end, but in a very homeopathic dose. It's really, really, really soft. This is for the attentive listener, just something far in the back. Yeah, just in case someone is listening attentively, he will hear this little bell. Okay, so the last part that we could talk about is the vocals, which is the most important part. The vocals carry the message, the story, and just give a face to the music. So I kept the best for the end. Let's listen to one verse, and then we go in and maybe solo out some vocals and see what they have been treated with. Okay, as you can hear, there is a ton of reverb and delay on the vocal. Just, yeah, this song is epic. It's supposed to be epic, and yeah, delays and reverbs just give you this size and epicness. As you probably could hear, we stacked like a low octave and a high octave on top of each other. The main vocal is the high vocal, and the lower was like, yeah, to beef up a little bit the actual melody. And fortunately we did this because this sounded so cool to me that, yeah, we used this as the main vocal for the introduction part. But mainly this high voice. This is the main voice, and has obviously more energy than the lower octave, where you naturally cannot put as much power into as in a higher octave. Yet treatment-wise, there is not a lot going on in the session itself. Again, we tried to capture it in a way that it would sit naturally well in the mix, And I think I used a lot of compression on the way in, so that now on the high vocals there is not even a compressor anymore on the tracks. On the lower, I see that there is a tiny bit of compression. And a lot of limiting in the loud parts. I'm not shy with using heavy limiting if the music calls for it. And if you have like a very dense environment and you need to put a very soft element in there, you can use either heavy compression or limiting, or you can use saturation or distortion just to bring that element into the foreground instead of just being buried in the mix. Effect-wise, I used a whole array of reverbs and delays, as I pretty much always do. Not always as much as here, but I like to again see this like spices when you're cooking. You don't put like 5 kilos of salt into your dish, but you put like a tiny bit, and then a little bit of pepper and a little bit of whatever. And this is the way I treat reverbs and delays in my mixes, like a little bit of everything, which adds up to a lot in total, but you don't have like this one very obvious reverb. So, here is like a lexicon, blah, blah, blah. And you really hear this one reverb. That's not the way I like it. I really like this blend of different things. And when I hit stop after playing, you can hear like these different textures that have been mixed up together. There are elements that are just staying straight, like a shimmery reverb, and then you have different types of delays, like shorter ones. Like I also like dotted delays a lot that are just bouncing around a little bit. And all this mixture really makes like this richness in the texture of all the reverbs. Here you can see the whole array of effects that have been used. Some, what do we have? Half delay, so pretty long. Here is a shimmery reverb. Then we have some quarter delay. There is again another half delay, just a different texture, because every delay or emulation of old delays just has a different sound. And I really like to combine these. Here's a pretty short room, 2 seconds. Here is another quarter delay. There's an eighth delay. Here's a dotted quarter delay. So this is bouncing around the more obvious repetitions of straight delays. I always have my good old Bricasti set to a room setting. Some old school AMS, RMX reverb. Some EMT 250. Yeah, just a ton of different reverbs combined to one big reverb. That's pretty much it. I have one interesting bit for the very end, which is the original demo that I got before we recorded that song, and which is what the drummer Michel Spithoven, who was the drummer of my old band and the session drummer for Falkenbach since Oknefna, this is what he used to play his drums too, before we actually recorded all the other instruments and the vocals. Have a listen to this. Yeah, that's what we used as a demo. As you can hear, there is like a horn or something mimicking the vocal melody already in the background. Yeah, there was drums on it. That's not really optimal to track drums to a demo that already has drums in. I don't know if I maybe tried to filter that out a little bit so that the drummer really only had like the harmonic structure and of course a metronome on the ear to play along to. But yeah, that's what we used as a demo and as a guide track to record the drums too. Yeah, that was it with our little walk through this session. I hope there was something interesting for you, and maybe next time that you listen to this song, you will hear those details and listen to it with another ear. If you enjoyed this or have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I would appreciate it. And thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.